Welcome back to MacBreak Studio. Mark and Steve here in the studio in beautiful Prescott, Arizona. We're talking about Final Cut Pro 10.4, specifically 360 video editing, and Steve is going to amaze us with some additional things you can do.
Tricks of the trade.
Tricks of the trade, of
Right.
the developing, evolving, constantly changing trade of 360 video.
Right, and there's some tools that you're going to want to put to use for 360 videos where you perhaps were shooting in an environment where you don't have releases for the people in the environment. You're still required to have releases for people. Or maybe you're shooting something where there's a logo, a branding that needs to come out.
Much trickier, right? Because the 360 is everything in the scene and everybody in the scene, and you can't just publish that without people's permission.
Right, so I'm going to show you some of the new 360 effects. Well, one in particular, and how to work with it in this scene. So, so here's a 360 scene I shot at my church. Is my daughter there? She's singing on their worship team here. And just so you know, you can be really clever about hiding the camera rig.
Yeah.
I'm going to look down here. No nadir patching, because I deliberately put the stitching box, but we used the Aura Eye, which has a live stitching. But we put it under the staircase.
So wait, so where's the camera?
The camera is actually right here in the shadowy area. It's actually right, you can't see it.
Nice, because the shadow's hiding it.
The shadow's hiding it.
Very cool, okay.
Right, so I just want to point out, sometimes you're going to be kind of like smart about where you place the camera. You can get away with hiding it so you don't have to
fixing it in post.
Fixing in post, right.
Nice.
So I'm I'm looking around the scene here, and it's cool. It's a nice little auditorium. And I want to focus on the bass player in the back. The bass player maybe has some branding on his shirt there, and we really don't want the going out with that. So we're going to use some of the effects to remove that. So I'm going to open the effects browser, and I'm in the 360 category, and I'll scroll down here. You'll see that there's some effects that have been specifically formulated for 360. There's a 360 channel blur, 360 Gaussian blur, 360 aura. I'm just skimming over their bloom. And you think, all right, well, these are all like effects that just really do weird things to the image. But if you think about it, most of these tools are for fixing or addressing things.
Yes.
They're not necessarily to add a look to your video.
Okay, they're not stylized filters or anything. They're...
The thing I want to point out about them is that they're specifically formulated for the 360 world. This is what I mean. If I go to the normal blur category and I throw on a Gaussian blur, okay, and just so you can see this, I'm going to open up the color board, and I'm going to crank up the exposure because it's a dark scene, and I want you to see that. Look at if you can see the scene. It doesn't do a clean job on the seams. When you add like a standard effect, the seams get affected
because the blur doesn't cross the seam correctly.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's blurring each side of it separately, and it really accentuates the seam.
That's right.
Okay.
I think it was important for people to see that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that color board effect, and go ahead and go back here and remove the Gaussian blur, the normal Gaussian blur, because I want to work with the 360 effect. Now, if I use the 360 blur, I'm not going to do it, but just trust me, the seams look perfect.
Looks good. Okay.
Look great. So, what other effects do we have in here? Well, one that I'm interested in is I need something to blur out that shirt. In fact, I'm going to zoom in. Well, we'll zoom in a second. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to find. I'm just going to use this Gaussian blur. Just throw that on the clip, and immediately it blurs everything, right? But we can constrain it to just the areas we want with a mask, just like any other effect.
Because all effects in Final Cut Pro 10 have built-in masks.
That's right.
Including the 360 version.
Exactly. Okay. So if I go up here to the top of the effect, there's that little button here.
Right.
I can go ahead and click that. I can choose a shape mask or a color mask. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a shape mask. And right now I'm not seeing the controls. Again, this gets me almost every time. You have to turn off any of the transforms, including reorient.
So reorient, turn
right.
On, yeah.
So what I'm going to want to do is start making this this size that I need it, and I'm just going to get it in the general area first. So in the general area, and then I'm going to want to zoom in because it's much harder to work when he's sitting at the back of the stage, right? So I'm going to go ahead and move this. I'm going to resize this, and I'm going to bring the softening way down. Let's bring this here.
And you probably don't need quite so much blur.
I know. Well, yes,
But it helps you see it.
It helps
clearly.
me see it, and you're right. The blur is very, very heavy-handed right now. So I'll just go ahead and just do that. You get the idea. You get that in there. And then, like you said, you're going to want to adjust the amount of blurring. So here, I don't have quite as much blur. See, just enough to where you can't make
Can't
out.
really see what's on there.
Can't really see what's on there.
Yeah.
So the great thing is, when I move around the sphere, that blur effect tracks.
Yeah, it sticks to it.
Because
the camera is stationary.
Right, so it's sticking to him. All right, so I move that around, it's blurred, right?
Yeah, as long as he doesn't move around.
Right. Now, well, he does. Unless this was an orchestra.
Right. A bass player
He's going to move around.
Okay.
He's going to be moving around. Right.
Some bass players are very static.
No, yeah, they just twist their.
They just twist, right,
They just
right.
twist. Exactly. But sometimes they don't twist. In fact, oh, look at that. He moved. Okay, so this is so easy to dress. I just move the playhead where I want, and for shape mask, I'll just add a keyframe.
Right.
And I'll just move the playhead to the play seat. Oh, it starts to move out there, and I'll just move the mask, and another keyframe is automatically set. This is standard fare, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is.
And it's pretty quick.
And it's
because there's not a lot
really
of
quick.
movement.
Yeah, there's very, very, very quick. So I'm just going through here and moving the mask, and it's adding keyframes, and look, it's essentially tracking, with him. So, and then, of course, you can make little adjustments along the way, but it's fairly simple to deal with this sort of thing.
Right. And if you change the shape or rotation of the mask, those will animate as well.
Yeah,
as you do that.
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
cool.
So one last thing I said, I want to deal with the color correction. The scene's just a little bit too blue for me.
It's very blue.
So I'm going to go ahead and go back to Fit. And I'm going to open up the awesome new color correction tools in Final Cut Pro 10.4.
So go to the Color Inspector.
Color Inspector. And I'm not going to use any of the color board. I'm going to use a new feature, which you've talked quite a bit about. I'm going to talk about the hue saturation curves. And these are all curves where you can do very targeted corrections on specific color regions within the image. And then you can either boost the saturation, or you can change the color, or you can work with illuminance. Each of these curves does something very specific.
Yes.
Now what I want to do is reduce the saturation of the blue. It's
just the blue.
The blue is just too saturated for me. So I'm going to use the hue versus sat control.
Okay.
I'm going to select the eyedropper, and it turns blue, and I'm just going to sample. I'm going to click the stage right there. And as soon as I do that, I'll get a control point right there in the hue versus. That's saying that's the value at that point.
That's
that pixel, that's that hue. So what I could do is to reduce the saturation, I'm just going to grab this and then start pulling down, and I'm essentially reducing the saturation of that sampled color.
Yeah.
So you can see it's
it right
really,
away.
you can completely see it, right? And then if you want to increase the tolerance, you can drag these little control points here, which are
it's the range.
It's a range, like an anchor, right? For the range that's being affected. So I just widen it a little bit, and it's definitely not as blue as it used to be. And maybe I did like a little bit of the stage line. I'll push a little back.
Nice.
The other thing is Rachel's face looks a little bit too
Kind of
yellowish for me. Yeah, she's being hit with yellow light. So this is where this other tool comes in. I love this tool so much. It's this. I know it says orange, but it's really color versus sat.
Any color.
Any color.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get this little eyedropper here, and I'm just going to sample her face here. And notice it changes from orange to yellow versus sat, because it sensed that there's a lot of yellow in those pixels. So right there, I'm going to add a control point. In fact, I might just...
So these are the brightness values from the darkest to the brightest values of that color.
I'm glad you pointed that out. You're right. But now I could... get started. Now notice I can go to the extreme. I'm really pulling the yellow. Now she's actually turning, well, her flesh tone's
a little pale.
A little pale. I want some yellow in there, but I'm saying you can really push it, or I can bring it down. The point is, color correction, as you know, is all about subtlety. So I'm just going to just bring it down and just reduce the amount of yellow in her face. I'll then go ahead and reset this back to fit. And if I play this, I've not only dealt with the bass player, but now there's a lot less blue in the scene.
Toggle the correction on and off with the checkbox there. You can really see the difference.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
So there's some tools.
Cool. So a combination of a 360 tip and a color correction tip, which are two of the big new features in Final Cut Pro 10.4.
Yeah, I had to get that in.
Nice.
Can't let you have all of the color correction glory. Are you kidding me?
So rippletraining.com for in-depth training on 360 video editing in Final Cut Pro 10 and advanced color correction. So check those out. And thank you for watching MacBreak Studio.